The galaxy was a vast expanse of stars, each holding the potential for life, discovery, and destruction. For centuries, the Galactic Union, an alliance of technologically superior species, had maintained a fragile peace. Earth, a small blue dot on the edge of the Milky Way, was little more than a forgotten corner in the sprawling empire. Humans, with their primitive technology and flawed governments, were rarely taken seriously by the galactic powers. Earth's place in the universe was insignificant until now. The Excelvar, an ancient and malevolent race, had begun their relentless assault on the galaxy. They were unlike anything the Union had faced before. Their ships were living, breathing organisms capable of manipulating space itself. Their weapons weren't just tools of war, they were capable of unraveling the very fabric of reality. No species was safe. Entire civilizations had already been wiped out, their planets turned to dust by the Selvar's devastating technology. Even the mighty fleets of the Galactic Union were struggling to keep pace. Despite their advanced technology, they couldn't understand the Selvar, and that made them all the more dangerous. The Union held an emergency council, where the fate of the galaxy was discussed in hushed tones. Desperation was beginning to set in. Every plan to combat the Excelvar had failed. Diplomacy had failed. Conventional warfare had failed. The Union's finest generals and scientists were at a loss. This was a crisis like no other, and as the galaxy teetered on the brink of destruction, the Council was forced to consider a radical solution, something no one could have imagined. It was at this moment that the Council made a decision that would change the course of history. They would turn to the one species they had long overlooked, the one species they had deemed irrelevant, the one species with a strength they had never fully understood: humans. The Council had been monitoring Earth for years, though they rarely intervened in its affairs. They had seen humans struggle with wars, pandemics, and ecological disasters. They had seen them on the brink of collapse, yet always managed to push forward, to adapt, to survive. What the Union didn't realize was that Earth's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its resources, but its people. Humans were survivors, capable of extraordinary feats of ingenuity, resilience, and creativity, traits that the Union had never fully appreciated. And so, they called upon humanity, not to fight alongside them, but to take on a mission no one else could accomplish. A single human, selected from Earth, would be sent to the heart of the Selvar's domain. This human would infiltrate their most heavily guarded world, uncover their secret weapon, and destroy it. One mission. One human. The fate of the galaxy would rest on her shoulders. Sarah Mitchell was the chosen one. Captain Sarah Mitchell wasn't a typical soldier. Raised on Earth, she had known hardship her entire life. She had trained as an elite operative in the human military, excelling in strategy, survival tactics, and combat. But it wasn't her physical abilities that had earned her the Council's attention. It was her ability to think outside the box, to adapt when all hope seemed lost. Where others saw obstacles, Sarah saw opportunities. Where others saw failure, Sarah saw the potential to turn the tide. As she stood in the war room of the Galactic Union's headquarters, Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. A mission to take on the Excelvar, the most dangerous race the galaxy had ever seen. It was madness, but there was no choice. The galaxy was on the brink of collapse, and she was humanity's last hope. As the details of the mission were laid out before her, Sarah's mind raced. She knew the Selvar's reputation. Their power was overwhelming, their technology far beyond anything humans had ever encountered. But she also knew that humanity had something that no one else had: the ability to adapt, to think creatively under pressure. She had done it countless times before on Earth. Now, she would have to do it on a galactic scale. The Council's voice was cold, clinical. You will be alone. No backup. No reinforcements. This mission must succeed at all costs. The galaxy's future depends on it. Sarah nodded, her expression determined. She had no illusions about the dangers she would face. But one thing was certain: she wasn't going to let humanity go down without a fight. She had one mission, one chance, and she would make sure it counted. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The ship that would carry Sarah Mitchell across the stars was nothing like the one she trained with back on Earth. It was sleek, with a shimmering metallic surface that seemed to blend with the stars around it. The Valiant, as it was called, was a state-of-the-art warship equipped with the finest technology the Galactic Union could offer. Still, the moment Sarah set foot on the ship, a chill ran down her spine. The weight of her mission, the enormity of what was at stake, settled in her chest like a stone. She was briefed once again by Commander Talo, the Union's top strategist. "We've intercepted some of the Excelvar's communications. They're preparing to deploy their ultimate weapon, a device capable of turning entire star systems into black holes. We believe it's located on their homeworld, Salvaris. You will have to infiltrate their planet, find the weapon, and destroy it." Sarah didn't flinch. She had heard the details before, but hearing them again only solidified her resolve. She wasn't a diplomat or a scientist. She was a soldier, and she had one job: to survive long enough to stop the destruction of everything she knew. Commander Talo handed her a small device. "This will allow you to track the weapon's energy signature. The Excelvar have no idea we detected it, but they'll be expecting you. The element of surprise will only get you so far." "Understood," Sarah said, tucking the device into her pocket. She'd faced impossible odds before. She could do it again. The Valiant's engines hummed to life, and the ship launched into the vast unknown. As Sarah gazed out the window, watching the stars blur into streaks of light, she couldn't help but think of Earth. Her home, so far, so fragile, yet the very thing she was fighting for. She clenched her fists, determined to protect it, to prove that humanity wasn't just a footnote in the history of the galaxy. Days passed in silence as the ship journeyed toward the Selvar's territory. The crew members, all highly trained beings from various species, did their best to remain focused. But Sarah knew the truth. The Union's finest soldiers had tried and failed to breach Selvaris. She was on her own. This mission wasn't about fighting an army, it was about survival. She would have to be smarter than her enemies. No one was coming to help her if she failed. When they finally reached the outskirts of the Selvar's space, the Valiant dropped into stealth mode, becoming invisible to enemy sensors. Sarah's pulse quickened. She was now in enemy territory, where one mistake could mean the end of everything. The first obstacle came sooner than she expected. As the Valiant crept through the dark void, a sudden flash of light pierced the ship's sensors. A fleet of Selvar warships emerged from a nearby nebula, their sleek, biomechanical forms rippling as they moved. The Excelvar were known for their ability to manipulate space, warping gravity and bending light to make their ships nearly invisible. They were also fast, deadly, and highly unpredictable. Before she could react, the ship's alarm blared, signaling an incoming attack. Sarah's instincts kicked in. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. She ordered the crew, her voice calm despite the chaos. The Valiant shot forward, dodging blasts of plasma that streaked through the void. The Excelvar ships moved with deadly precision, their weapons crackling with energy. Sarah felt the ship shudder under the force of each hit. Shields holding at 70%, the ship's AI reported. The crew scrambled to keep the ship intact, but Sarah knew it wasn't enough. The Excelvar's superior firepower would eventually tear them apart. But there was one advantage she had: unpredictability. Earth's military tactics were based on improvisation, taking risks where others wouldn't. "Engage the asteroid field," Sarah commanded. The Valiant veered toward a nearby cluster of asteroids, a dangerous maneuver that would make them harder to target. The Excelvar followed, eager to finish off their prey. As the ship weaved through the jagged rocks, Sarah saw an opening. The Excelvar ships were following too closely, their focus on destroying the Valiant blinding them to the environment around them. Sarah's hands flew over the controls, adjusting the ship's speed and trajectory. She led the Valiant into a narrow asteroid tunnel, the ship's hull scraping against the rocks. The Excelvar ships were too big, too slow to follow. For a brief moment, everything went quiet. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. They had escaped. For now. But she knew this was only the beginning. The Excelvar were relentless, and they wouldn't give up until she was destroyed. Sarah took a deep breath, steadying herself. She wasn't just fighting for her life, she was fighting for the future of the galaxy, and she was just getting started. The escape through the asteroid field had bought Sarah some time, but the danger was far from over. The Valiant was still hidden in the depths of space, but the Excelvar would eventually find them. She had no illusions. They always found their prey. As the ship's engines hummed in the quiet void, Sarah paced the bridge, her mind racing. She had been briefed about the enemy's cunning, their ruthless pursuit of anything they considered a threat. But this, the chaos, the near-death experience, was unlike anything she had faced. She needed answers, and fast. The Excelvar were methodical and merciless. Sarah had to reach their homeworld, Selvarus, and destroy the weapon before it was too late. But with the Selvar closing in, she couldn't afford to keep running forever. Suddenly, a voice crackled through the comm system, cutting through the silence like a jagged knife. It was faint, barely audible, but unmistakable. "Human, you are not alone." Sarah froze, her heart pounding. She knew the Excelvar had advanced technology that could hack into communication systems. She braced for an ambush, but the voice didn't sound hostile. In fact, it was almost desperate. "Who is this?" Sarah demanded, her fingers hovering over the control panel, ready to activate the ship's weapons. "Not enemy," the voice said with an odd accent. "I am Zoreth. I have information you need. I can help." Sarah's instincts screamed that this was a trap. No one helped a human without a cost. But then again, if this was some kind of Selvar trick, they wouldn't have broadcasted their message so openly. She was running out of options. "What do you want?" Sarah's voice was steady, though every fiber of her being screamed to trust no one, especially not an alien she couldn't see. "I want nothing," Zoreth replied. "I seek freedom. The Excelvar. They are monsters. They destroyed my people, my family. I no longer serve them." There was a pause, as if the alien was gathering its courage. "I can help you destroy the weapon. I know where it is, how to get to it. But you must trust me." Sarah stood motionless, weighing her options. The Excelvar were too powerful for any direct confrontation. She was alone, outnumbered and outgunned. If there was even a chance that Zoreth could provide a way in, she had to take it. The Excelvar had decimated entire civilizations, and the clock was ticking. "Where are you?" she asked. "Not far. I am near," Zoreth answered. "I will come to you, but beware. The Excelvar know you are here. They will come for you soon." Sarah's pulse quickened. If Zoreth was telling the truth, she might have a fighting chance. But she had to make a decision fast. She couldn't keep running forever. The Valiant was an impressive ship, but it wasn't invincible. If she stayed here, they would find her. She needed to act before the Excelvar locked onto her location. "I'm giving you one chance," Sarah said firmly. "If you lead me into a trap, I'll make sure you regret it." "I am no liar, human," Zoreth's voice replied with a strange mixture of determination and something that sounded like hope. "I have seen what the Excelvar do. I have watched them tear entire worlds apart. I will help you stop them." There was a beat of silence, then a faint ping from the ship's sensors. Sarah looked at the readout. The signal was coming from a nearby derelict ship, a small disabled vessel that had once belonged to the Excelvar but was now abandoned. It was floating in the void, a shadow among the stars. Zoreth was there. "Get aboard. I'll meet you at the coordinates," Sarah said, her voice sharp with focus. There was no turning back now. The Valiant slowly adjusted its course, moving cautiously toward the derelict ship. As they drew closer, Sarah couldn't help but feel a surge of tension. Every part of her screamed that this could be a trap, but in the face of imminent destruction, she had little choice. If Zoreth was telling the truth, he held the key to stopping the Excelvar. The docking process was seamless. The moment the airlock opened, Sarah stepped out onto the strange vessel, a faint hum of alien technology filling the space around her. Standing at the far end of the ship was Zorith, a figure cloaked in dark, flowing robes. His eyes, large and slightly iridescent, met hers, and for the first time since she had left Earth, Sarah felt a small flicker of hope. Zorith spoke again, his voice calm and measured. "You're not alone, human. I will show you how to defeat them. Together, we will change the galaxy." Sarah nodded, her resolve hardening. Whatever happened next, she couldn't afford to fail. The galaxy was depending on her, and now on an unlikely ally. The derelict ship, though small and battered, was an unexpected haven. Zorith led Sarah through its dimly lit halls, his alien form moving effortlessly through the ship's narrow corridors. The air smelled of stale metal and ozone, remnants of the Selvar's technology long gone cold. Every step they took seemed to echo in the vast emptiness of the abandoned vessel, heightening Sarah's sense of unease. She wasn't just walking through a ship, she was entering the heart of enemy territory. "Why did you leave the Selvar?" Sarah asked as they moved deeper into the ship, her voice breaking the silence that had settled between them. She was trying to understand the creature who had come to her aid, the one who had turned against his own kind. She needed to know if she could truly trust him. Zorith's gaze flickered toward her, his large eyes reflecting something she couldn't quite decipher. "I was a soldier once," he said, his voice low and measured. "I fought for their cause, believing it was the right one. But I was wrong. I saw what they did to my people, what they did to entire civilizations. The Excelvar are conquerors, not saviors. They destroy, reshape, and enslave." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "The final straw was when I learned of their weapon, the one you are seeking to destroy. It isn't just a weapon, it's alive. It was created using the power of an ancient entity, a being of unimaginable energy. The Excelvar think they control it, but they don't. It controls them." Sarah's mind raced. She had suspected something far darker was at play with the Selvar's weapon, but this, an ancient, sentient force. She hadn't been prepared for that. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. "Where is it?" she asked, her voice tight with urgency. "Selvarus," Zorith answered simply. "The weapon is housed at the heart of their capital, deep within the core of their planet. It is protected by their most elite forces. But more than that, it is guarded by something even more dangerous, the Selvar Emperor himself." Sarah's stomach tightened. The Selvar Emperor, a figure of legend and terror, was said to possess abilities that bordered on the supernatural. No one had ever faced him and lived, but if Sarah had any chance of completing her mission, she would have to go through him. Zorith led her into the control room of the derelict ship, where a holographic map of Selvarus flickered to life. The planet's surface was a chaotic mess of war zones, heavily fortified areas, and massive industrial complexes. But at the center, there was a pulsating light, an energy field that seemed to warp the space around it. That was where the weapon lay. Sarah's eyes narrowed. The task ahead was monumental. The Excelvar had created their stronghold around this weapon, and its power was unlike anything she had ever encountered. But now, with Zorith's knowledge and the map in hand, she could see a way in. "There are tunnels beneath the planet's surface," Zorith explained, his voice growing more intense. "Ancient structures built long before the Excelvar ever came to Excelvarus. The tunnels were used by an ancient civilization, but they are nearly forgotten now. It's the only way in that the Excelvar do not watch, but it's not safe. The tunnels are filled with traps, deadly and unpredictable." Sarah took a deep breath, every fiber of her being screamed at her to turn back. But she couldn't. The future of the galaxy rested on this mission. She could not let the Selvar's weapon fall into the wrong hands. "I'll do it," she said firmly, her resolve hardening. "I'll go through the tunnels." Zorith studied her for a long moment, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something akin to respect in his eyes. "You're brave, human. I don't know if you'll make it, but I'll help you. I'll show you the way." The two of them spent the next several hours preparing for the dangerous journey ahead. Sarah knew that the moment she entered the Selvar stronghold, she would be walking into the heart of their empire. There would be no turning back. As they finalized their plans, Zorith turned to her once more. We will need to be quick. The Excelvar will have patrols searching for us soon, and the Emperor. His voice trailed off, a dark warning in his tone. He is not like other beings. He can sense threats. He will know you are coming. Sarah's eyes hardened. She had faced the impossible before. This mission would be no different. With Zorith's help, she would infiltrate the heart of the Selvar's power. She would destroy the weapon and stop their reign of terror. The galaxy depended on her, and she wasn't about to fail. The journey into the heart of the Selvar Empire was fraught with dangers from the moment they set foot on Selvaris. The planet's surface was an oppressive sight, scarred by the destructive power of its inhabitants. Towering spires of blackened metal rose from the planet like the jagged teeth of a monstrous beast, while the air buzzed with an unnatural stillness. It was as if the entire planet was waiting, holding its breath, ready to unleash hell at a moment's notice. Sarah, her armor adjusted to blend with the alien environment, followed closely behind Zorith, who led the way with an air of confidence she hadn't expected. Despite his past, despite the betrayal of his people, he seemed to know exactly where he was going. The ancient tunnels he spoke of were real, though the overgrowth of alien plant life and the eerie silence that filled the dark passageways felt more like a tomb than a pathway to salvation. They moved cautiously, their steps echoing off the stone walls of the tunnel, the only sounds the soft hum of Sarah's breathing and Zorith's footsteps ahead of her. The map he had shown her earlier had been helpful, but the tunnels themselves were a maze. Every twist and turn brought new dangers, hidden pits, sharp traps triggered by motion, and the faint but unmistakable feeling of being watched. Sarah's senses were on high alert, every instinct screaming that they weren't alone. There's a patrol ahead, Zorith whispered, his voice barely audible. His eyes flicked toward a faint light seeping from the junction ahead. They'll pass through here soon. We need to be still. Stay close. Sarah nodded, her hand resting on the grip of her sidearm. She had never felt so vulnerable, surrounded by an alien world, a powerful enemy, and with no backup. Yet, in some strange way, she found a new clarity. She had no choice but to succeed. The patrol passed without incident. 3 Selvar warriors, their sleek, organic armor reflecting the dim glow of their torches. They spoke in low, guttural tones, completely unaware of the 2 figures crouched in the shadows mere feet away. Sarah held her breath, careful not to make a sound as the Selvar soldiers moved past them, their eyes scanning the darkness. Zorith waited until the last echo of footsteps faded, then he exhaled slowly. We have little time. The deeper we go, the closer we get to the weapon, and the more dangerous it becomes. Sarah stood, adjusting her gear and making sure her weapons were ready. She didn't speak, knowing that Zorith was right. The stakes were getting higher, and every minute brought them closer to their goal, and closer to death if they weren't careful. The tunnel stretched on for what felt like hours, the walls narrowing in places, the air growing thick with an oppressive weight. Zorith led her toward a massive chamber, one that seemed to stretch endlessly into the distance. The room was alive with energy, the floor pulsing with an unnatural light, casting long shadows that danced like specters in the corners. It was clear now that the weapon wasn't just a machine. It was something far more complex, something deeply rooted in the very heart of the Selvar's power. There Zorith said, pointing to a distant structure at the far end of the chamber. It was massive. An enormous pyramid-like structure with tendrils of light and energy spiraling around it, almost like veins of living matter. At its core was a pulsating orb, glowing with a sickly green light that seemed to hum with a malevolent energy. That's it, Sarah whispered, her pulse quickening. The weapon was even more terrifying than she imagined. It wasn't just a tool of destruction, it was a force of nature itself. But even as the sight of the weapon filled her with dread, Sarah's resolve remained firm. She had come this far. She couldn't turn back now. How'd we destroy it? She asked, her voice steady despite the growing sense of unease. Zorith's expression darkened. We will need to reach the core, but it will not be easy. The weapon is alive, and it is protected by the Emperor's elite guard. No one gets close without facing them first. Sarah's fingers tightened around her weapon. She had known this wouldn't be easy, but with the weapon so close, she couldn't afford to hesitate. "We'll do whatever it takes," Sarah said, her voice hardening. "I didn't come this far to fail." Zorath nodded, his expression grim. "Then we move quickly. The Excelvar will sense your presence soon. We don't have much time." Together, they advanced toward the weapon, the hum of energy growing louder with each step. The chamber seemed to close in around them, as if the very walls were aware of their intrusion. Sarah felt the weight of the galaxy's future pressing down on her shoulders, but she refused to let fear take hold. The enemy was waiting, but she had one mission: to destroy the weapon. The galaxy's fate depended on it, and she would not fail. The closer Sarah and Zorath got to the heart of the weapon, the more the air seemed to thrum with energy. It was as if the very walls were alive, pulsing with the malignant force that powered the Selvar's destructive tool. Sarah could feel the hairs on the back of her neck stand up, the oppressive presence of the weapon weighing heavily on her mind. This was no ordinary machine. It was something ancient, something that had been imbued with a consciousness far older than the Excelvar themselves. Zorath's face remained unreadable as they advanced, but Sarah could see the tension in his posture, the way his eyes darted around them, constantly scanning for threats. They were walking deeper into the heart of the enemy's power. Every step brought them closer to their goal, and to certain death if they weren't careful. Suddenly, the silence that had settled over them shattered like glass. A low, ominous growl echoed from the darkness, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy and purposeful. Sarah's hand instinctively went to her sidearm, her breath catching in her throat. She knew they weren't alone anymore. The first of the Excelvar's elite guards appeared from the shadows, their tall, intimidating forms gliding toward them with eerie precision. These soldiers were unlike any Sarah had faced before. Their bodies were covered in a dark, organic armor that seemed to shift and adapt as they moved, their eyes glowing a menacing red. They were fast, efficient, and utterly relentless. Without a word, the guards raised their weapons, a mix of energy blades and guns designed for close-quarters combat. Sarah's heart raced as she scanned the room, looking for a way out. There was none. The chamber was too large, too open. There was only one way through. Zorath stepped forward, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "You will not pass." The Excelvar guards did not hesitate. They attacked with ferocity, moving as one coordinated force. Sarah barely had time to react. Her sidearm barked in the silence, sending energy blasts flying toward the closest guard, but they were absorbed by the Excelvar's armor without so much as a dent. She cursed under her breath, realizing that conventional weapons wouldn't be enough. The first guard swung his energy blade with lightning speed, and Sarah barely ducked in time, the blade grazing her shoulder. The pain was sharp, but she pushed it aside, focusing entirely on survival. She rolled to the side, drawing her secondary weapon, a small explosive device designed to disable enemy tech. She tossed it toward the advancing soldiers, but one of the guards anticipated the move, leaping into the air and intercepting the explosion with a powerful shield that deflected the blast. Zorath moved with terrifying precision, his own weapons flashing in the dim light. He engaged one of the guards in a brutal fight, his strikes fluid and efficient, but the guards were relentless, their speed and strength a deadly match for his agility. Sarah felt a cold chill run down her spine. These weren't ordinary soldiers, they were something else. The Emperor's personal enforcers, each one capable of wiping out entire squads of soldiers without breaking a sweat. "We need to get to the core, now," Zorath shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. He parried a blow from one of the guards, his own blade flashing through the air, narrowly missing the Selvar's throat. He was fast, but Sarah could see the toll the battle was taking on him. Every blow, every move seemed to drain him just a little more. Sarah didn't hesitate. She darted toward the far end of the chamber, where the weapon pulsed with terrifying energy. If they could just reach it, they could disable it, destroy it before the Emperor's guards overwhelmed them. The Excelvar were closing in fast, but Sarah's mind was singularly focused on her goal. Another guard lunged toward her, but Zorith intercepted him, locking blades in a brutal clash of sparks and steel. "Go," he shouted. "I'll hold them off." Sarah didn't look back. She ran, every step propelling her closer to the weapon. The ground beneath her feet seemed to vibrate with the immense power emanating from the core. The air was thick with static, buzzing with the deadly energy that threatened to tear the very fabric of reality apart. The weapon's presence was overwhelming, its pull impossible to ignore. It seemed to call to her, urging her to give in, to let it control her. But Sarah knew better. She couldn't let it win. She wouldn't. The weapon was within reach now. Its core was a swirling mass of energy, glowing with an unnatural green light. The closer Sarah got, the more she could feel its power, its hunger. She felt her heartbeat quicken, the force almost drawing her in. But she had come too far to fail now. With one final push, she dove toward the core, slamming her fist into the control panel beside it. A series of alarms blared, and the entire chamber seemed to quake with the force of the weapon's reaction. It was alive, and it was fighting back. The sound of footsteps echoed from behind her. The Emperor's elite guards were closing in. Sarah's time was running out. She didn't hesitate. With a swift movement, she activated the fail-safe mechanism Zorith had given her, sending a surge of energy into the weapon's core. For a moment, everything went silent. Then the chamber erupted in light, a blinding, searing wave of energy that shattered the walls, the ceiling, and everything in its path. The weapon screamed in agony, its power spiraling out of control. Sarah stumbled back, shielding her eyes from the intense light. The rune was collapsing around her. "Zorith!" she shouted, her voice lost in the roar of the explosion. But there was no answer. The weapon was destroyed. The galaxy was saved. But at what cost? The explosion from the weapon's core seemed to tear through the very fabric of the chamber, sending waves of energy surging outward. The light was blinding and the sound deafening. Sarah shielded her eyes, instinctively ducking low to the ground as the room around her quaked violently. The stone walls cracked, chunks of debris falling from above, scattering across the floor in a chaotic storm of destruction. She had done it. The weapon was no more, its deadly power reduced to nothingness. But as the violent shockwave continued to reverberate through the chamber, she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in her gut. Zorith. She scanned the debris-filled room, her breath coming in sharp gasps. There was no sign of him. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat a painful reminder that the battle had come at a great cost. The collapse of the chamber had come fast. They hadn't had enough time to escape. The blast had been too strong, too sudden. "Zorith," she shouted, her voice hoarse, but her words were swallowed by the destruction that surrounded her. She stumbled over fallen rocks and twisted metal, her hands reaching out in a frantic search for the alien ally who had led her here. He had promised to hold the guards off, to give her the time she needed. Had he made it? Or had the explosion claimed him as well? A faint movement caught her eye, a shadow in the distance, weak and stumbling. Sarah's pulse surged with hope. She rushed toward it, ignoring the debris that threatened to collapse further with each step she took. Her legs burned from the exertion, her body aching from the battle, but the thought of losing Zorith made her push forward, her resolve solidifying with every painful breath. When she reached him, she found Zorith kneeling on the ground, blood dripping from a gash across his forehead, his robe torn and battered. His eyes were unfocused, but he was alive. Barely. "Zorith," Sarah gasped, dropping to her knees beside him. "You're alive." He managed a weak smile, his voice strained but still filled with a quiet strength. "I said I would help you," he murmured. "It seems I kept my word." Sarah's heart swelled with gratitude, but the sight of his condition made her stomach turn. The blast had clearly taken its toll. She checked his pulse, her hands trembling, but it was weak, too weak. His body was still fighting, but for how much longer? "You're hurt," she said, her voice breaking. "We need to get out of here. We can't stay. There's no time." Zora's hand shot out to grasp hers, his grip surprisingly strong. "No, no time to escape," he whispered. "The Emperor, he will come. He'll know what you've done." His gaze flickered toward the ruins of the weapons core, and his voice grew fainter. "The galaxy, it won't be free yet. Not until the Emperor is stopped." Sarah clenched her jaw, anger rising in her chest. She had destroyed the weapon, the very thing the Telvar had used to dominate entire worlds. But Zorith was right. The Emperor wasn't just a leader, he was a force of destruction in his own right. If he wasn't stopped, the Excelvar would find a way to rebuild, to regain their power. Zorith's eyes fluttered, his strength waning. He managed a final lingering look at her, his lips forming words that barely reached her ears. The key to defeating him lies in the heart of their capital. Find the Emperor. End him, or all of this will be for nothing. His hand fell limp in hers, and for a moment, Sarah felt a deep, soul-shattering silence. Zorith was gone. Her mind raced, grief and rage threatening to overwhelm her. She had come so far, fought so hard, and now one of the only allies she had in this foreign galaxy was lost. But she couldn't afford to mourn. Not yet. Zora's sacrifice had given her the path forward. The Excelvar Emperor was still alive, and now it was her duty to finish what they had started. She rose to her feet, wiping her tears away as they mixed with the dirt and blood staining her face. The mission wasn't over. Zorat's words were clear. The Emperor was the true threat, the source of the Selvar's power and cruelty. There was no time to grieve. Sarah had come this far, and now the galaxy's fate rested squarely on her shoulders. The Excelvar would never stop, but neither would she. Not until the Emperor was no more. With grim determination, she turned and made her way toward the exit, stepping over the wreckage of the chamber. Her heart was heavy, but her resolve was stronger than ever. She would stop the Emperor, for Zorith, for the galaxy. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. Sarah's journey through the ruined tunnels felt like a fevered dream. The destruction around her was the result of the blast, but the mission wasn't complete yet. She had barely made it out of the collapsed chamber before the tunnel started to quake with aftershocks, as if the entire planet was reacting to the weapon's destruction. Every step she took felt heavier, the weight of Zorith's sacrifice pressing down on her shoulders like an unshakable burden. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the path forward. The Emperor. Zorith's final words had been clear. Find the Emperor and end him. But how? The Telvar Emperor was no ordinary being. His very existence seemed to warp the reality around him. Sarah had never faced an enemy like him, and she knew the path to his capital would be riddled with dangers far beyond what she had already endured. The thought of facing him alone was terrifying, but the flame of vengeance and justice burned in her chest, fiercer than any fear she felt. She couldn't let Zorith's death, the countless lives lost in this war, be in vain. The galaxy depended on her. The outer edge of the Selvar capital loomed in the distance as she emerged from the tunnels. The towering, jagged spires of their empire reached toward the sky like obsidian fingers, casting long, dark shadows over the shattered landscape. The heart of the Telvar was as intimidating as it was magnificent. The energy emanating from the capital was palpable, a living presence that thrummed with the power of the Emperor himself. As Sarah approached the main gates, a silent alarm must have gone off because the guards were already mobilizing. She'd barely had time to register their movements before the first wave of Selvar warriors appeared, their black armor gleaming in the dim light. They had been expecting her, but she was ready. With no time to waste, Sarah opened fire, her shots precise and calculated. The guards, caught off guard by her relentless attack, faltered for a split second, but that was all she needed. She moved like a shadow, swift and efficient, her combat training taking over as she disarmed and neutralized the enemies in her path. She had no illusions. These soldiers were deadly, but she was better. She had the will to do whatever it took. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her focus never wavered. With every soldier she took down, she felt a step closer to her goal. She fought like she had nothing left to lose, because in a way she didn't. Zorith was gone, But his words had lit a fire in her. She would finish what they started. The Emperor would not escape her wrath. After clearing the outer defenses, Sarah made her way deeper into the capital, slipping past patrols and cutting down any soldiers who got in her way. The deeper she went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, the air thick with the energy of the Emperor. Every instinct told her she was getting closer. And then she reached it. The central chamber, the very heart of the Selvar Empire. It was a vast cathedral-like structure towering above her with walls that seemed to pulse with dark power. At the center, atop a massive throne, sat the Emperor. His presence alone was overwhelming, filling the room with an aura of sheer malevolence. He was massive, his form cloaked in dark robes that seemed to absorb the light around him. His face was hidden, but his eyes glowed with an otherworldly intensity, piercing the darkness like twin suns. "You have come far, human," the Emperor's voice echoed through the chamber, smooth and cold, like a serpent's hiss. "But your journey ends here. You are nothing but a fleeting distraction, a mortal who dares to challenge the might of the Selvar." Sarah stood tall, her pulse steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "I didn't come this far to turn back. Your reign ends now." The Emperor chuckled, a deep, hollow sound that resonated through the chamber. "You think you can destroy me? I am not bound by your feeble concept of time. I have seen the rise and fall of empires. You are but a brief flicker in the grand scheme of the universe." He raised one hand, and the very air seemed to warp around them. Sarah's heart raced as an invisible force slammed into her chest, sending her sprawling to the ground. The Emperor's power was unlike anything she had ever felt. He wasn't just controlling the environment, he was manipulating reality itself. But Sarah didn't hesitate. She pulled herself up, ignoring the pain that screamed through her body. The mission had never been about power. It had been about will. And her will was stronger than anything he could throw at her. With a snarl, Sarah fired her weapon, unleashing everything she had left. The Emperor deflected her shots with a wave of his hand. But Sarah wasn't finished. She had one last trick up her sleeve. Zoreth had given her a device, a small, unassuming object designed to disrupt the Emperor's connection to the weapon. She activated it. The device hummed to life, and the energy in the room shifted. The Emperor's expression faltered, confusion flashing across his face for the briefest of moments. That was all Sarah needed. With a single decisive move, she charged forward, using every ounce of strength and every last bit of her fury to close the gap. The battle had been long, but now it was over.